The story itself is detailing kind of a coming of age story as well, where a man basically gets into Oxford and happens to find a classmate to his liking, and during that time, of course, around like the early 19th century, not the 19th century, 20th century, most of the time same-sex was more of a taboo. So in terms of how the story goes, it really discusses how taboo. Sorry.
Okay.
This is Emily.
This is Stephanie.
And today we're actually going to continue with our book bingo challenge, and our video for today will be about LGBT romance. We both picked one book that we've finished reading, and that will be our completion. So for my pick in particular, I decided to go with more of a classic touch this time, and my book is Maurice by E.M. Forster. But overall, in the early 20th century is where the book setting happens in Oxford, and at the time same-sex love was considered taboo, and the story basically revolves around the main character trying to really struggling to come to terms with his sexual attraction, while the object of his affection, this man who's from a relatively wealthy family, ends up deciding against being with him, and how that kind of like works out for both of them in the story. So it's actually been a pretty interesting read, just because in general, I guess in terms of today's attitude, it's been really different. And at the time when E.M. Forster wrote it, he made a conscious choice not to publish the book until after he died, because of the way that it would have been seen. So I thought that was always a really interesting read. Like, I understand that a lot of, in terms of how our time is with like, we need diverse books, it's become more of a present issue, and it's like becoming more mainstream to write about these sort of relationships. But I wanted to really go with like a different angle this time with the challenge, so I ended up choosing one that was more about like love, the same sort of love, but at a different era.
Okay, so the book that I picked is If I Was Your Girl by MEREDITH RUSSO. I had picked this book. It was on my TBR list since last year when it first came out, and it basically follows the story of a girl called Amanda who just transferred to a new school and is living with her dad now, and how, you know, she's somehow got assimilated with the popular girls. And then she finds this guy who really likes her, and she really likes him back, you know, like teenage love, whatnot. And then the one thing is that she's in hiding is the fact that her name used to be Andrew. So this book is a transgender book, and it's by author MEREDITH RUSSO, who actually is a transgender herself. So I think in the book they say you're supposed to call them trans people or something. So trans people, I thought was most interesting because at the end, I got this book as an audiobook from the library, and at the really end it had kind of a, you know, author's notes where MEREDITH actually talked about how she came upon this story, why she decided to write it, how she's a trans person herself, and how she wrote it, because a lot of the things in the book, because it's still fiction, doesn't actually portray the reality of things. For example, getting on the hormone pills or doing the surgery. In the book, she made things to be very more smooth, because it's, you know, she wants, for the purpose of the book, she had to make things a lot more faster and a lot more smoother, as opposed to her personal reality. So I thought it was a very interesting read. I love the characters. I definitely recommend it. I think this is one of the few books I gave 5 stars, which is pretty rare for me.
Yeah, I think I've actually heard about this book before.
Yeah, it's a really, I think it was one of the best books of like last year or something like that, one of the top rated books. So yeah, I definitely recommend it if you're into that, if you want to learn more about the LGBT community, especially the trans people community, because honestly I feel like trans people is a community that I'm not really familiar with. I feel like it's not really talked about as much these days, as opposed to like gay and lesbian, just because I mean for me personally, I feel like I know a lot more gay and lesbians as opposed to a trans person. Like, I don't think I know anyone.
I think they're less likely to like want to come out and tell you.
Exactly, which is why like I feel like no one really talks about them too much, because they're still not really forthright with coming out. as opposed to the rest of the LGBT community?
Yeah, I'd say that it's, at least in like media, it's becoming a little more mainstream, but it's definitely seen as, unfortunately using this word, like more of an exotic topic still. Yeah, in terms of like the Danish Girl, the movie,
Right.
and I feel like like if Boys Don't Cry, that was a relatively older movie that I can just remember from the top of my head. I would have to agree with you. I don't think I have. I'm not really familiar with many trans people myself.
Yeah, exactly.
I am sure that I've met them before in school, but I wasn't really in their circle at the time. And I mean, I'm not going to be like, oh, you are it, so I'm going to be friends with you.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, so I think that was a good recommendation on your part.
Yeah, and I think it's really interesting because you kind of, even though a lot of the stuff is still fiction, but it really kind of allows you to understand the struggles they really go through. Because at least that is still pretty realistic.
Okay.
So, yeah, I mean, definitely recommend it.
Okay. Yeah, and my book I definitely would recommend as well, just given that it was written pretty well, given it's E.M. Foster. And I guess in a lot of the context of like what we read today compared to what was back then, you can really see the progress we've kind of made in terms of like seeing people as who they are versus like having to really like keep things more repressed as a society. So I don't know if you would particularly like my pick. I feel like you might struggle a little bit reading it.
Well, that's the thing. I actually, personal preference, I personally don't really like LGBT novels just because like, I mean, it's not that I don't like them. It's just that it's more of a struggle for me to read them because I still like my relationship, like love relationship, like romance as like a boy and a girl, just because that's who like my personal preference.
Okay, I see.
So like when you talk about, you know, a guy and a girl and a girl, I can't really connect to them as well, just because personally I'm not in that. That's not my preference, you know?
That's actually quite funny, and I think that's actually why I feel like this video is really important, just because I actually I have met like people through work,
right?
Hopefully I'm not calling them out, but like who have actually expressed to me that most of the time they don't like reading like heterosexual relationships, pretty much for the same reasons why you don't like reading. You don't have not you don't like, but you don't have a preference to pick up like LGBT books.
Like if a regular romance versus I'm like I would prefer like this heterosexual romance just because that's my personal preference. Like I like, you know, talking about the guy and like, oh my goodness, you know, like from a girl perspective or vice versa. But like for the reason why I like this book a lot is because it actually tells you that kind of perspective, because now, you know, she's a girl and she still likes men. So for me it still works because it's still a girl and a guy.
Okay, so like for me, I guess Maurice sort of works just because I could really understand, not necessarily like obviously not from like a male to male relationship, but more in the sense of unrequited love and like I guess the outward influences and environmental cues that sort of prevent you from being together. I think that's something like I think that's the reason why I could really relate sometimes with the book, just because it is quite a tragedy when you know both of you are kind of in the same place in terms of like heart, but you can't be together because of like what everyone else says, and what everyone else says does dictate a lot of like what your future will look like. And I feel like that's something that was very prevalent back then, and I still feel like it's an issue now, you know, in terms of like, are you really free to like marry whoever you want, really? Like there's still that sort of like friction, maybe not necessarily an issue that you think about every day, but at least from my point of view, I think my book was a good read just because I could figure that out from there. Yeah, but by no means did I say that I understood the relationship, the attraction at all.
That's the same. Like I feel like I wouldn't, just because I'm not.
And that's completely fair.
So, I mean, I do appreciate really good LGBT novels. It's just that it wouldn't be my preference to pick up in the beginning. So.
Yeah, which is why this was our challenge.
Yeah.
We definitely read outside of our scope.
Yeah, but I actually really like this book, so I'm really shocked. So you should totally read this book too.
Okay, cool. All right, so this is actually our recommendation. Your recommendation again was
If I Was Your Girl by Meredith Russo.
My recommendation was Maurice by E.M. Foster. Thank you for listening to our watching our video. If you liked it, please like it. If you want to continue to see what else we read every single week, please subscribe. And if you feel like you have anything more to say about our particular picks, or if you have more recommendations for us, please comment down below. Anything else to add?
Nope, that's it.
All right, see you
Thank
guys.
You guys. Bye.